So welcome to the Flow Feldenkrais Tuesday night, 6:30 awareness through movement lesson. And as you can imagine, the room is not packed. However, I thought it would be more interesting to do this from the studio where we do these lessons every week. So this is our yoga studio. We're at inside Jefferson Farm Kitchen. And this is a studio set up by Louise, who does the Joyful Yoga in Jacksonville, and she does a beautiful job with just organizing everything and decorating things. All right, so I just want to start with a reading while people are sort of coming on. I'm going to maybe check in every now and then. I have to move the cursor to see if somebody's joined. But I'm going to read something just to get us started from Moshe Feldenkrais's book, The Elusive Obvious. My favorite title of any book of all time. But in this book, he says that without learning to know ourselves as intimately as we possibly can, we limit our choice. And life is not very sweet without freedom of choice. Change, in fact, is very difficult with no alternatives in sight. We then resign ourselves to not dealing with our difficulties as if they were prescribed by heaven. So tell me if you relate to that. I know that for myself, it seemed like young person, 20s, boom, smash, bong, hit 30, and all of a sudden it was much harder to realize my unavowed dreams or even my avowed dreams than it had ever been before. And so we are basically running into the social programming that we've been accustomed to dealing with, and it's so ingrained in us that we don't even notice it. It's happening. So I've set up some things to I just wrote some stuff down that I wanted to go into, because usually, you know, I'm talking to real people, so I have to sort of pretend here. But Flow Feldenkrais meets every Tuesday, 6:30 to 7:30, depending on how long it takes. It may go faster just because we're doing it in this format. Usually it's an hour and a half. I invite you to come. The Zoom meetings are free, and just use the same link every single time. And if you would pre-register once, you don't have to register again. You've got the link, and so you'll know how that works. So awareness, the cliche is that awareness is just the first step. People don't really talk about that in awareness through movement, but to move beyond awareness, what do you do? So what is the next step? So it's to expand awareness. So we live in a time when people think that multitasking is the thing, right? But in fact, multitasking just makes us more inefficient. And so the next step is to expand awareness using mindful movement as the means. And this translates to an expansion of mobility in mind and in body, which makes life richer, more subtle, and more fulfilling across the board. So living then becomes more spontaneous, more free, and more intriguing. We become, as we lose that programming that we've had from society, from the media, from our parents, from our teachers, from the way that we learn to be externally motivated, the way that we learn to allow the environment to dictate how we should be, or how we should move, or how we should think, or how we should behave. The more we relax out of that, the more we unprogram it, the more we return to that innocence that is the nature of how children are. So I just want to emphasize that I think this is an opportunity. I know everybody's all quite freaked out, right, by this whole don't get near me thing. But what's a positive spin that we could put on this? So where do we go from here? Personally, I feel that there's no depth to human experience, and that every opportunity, every experience is an opportunity to go deeper. And so our experience today is one where, we can explore together. Honestly, I spent many years in a state of abject grief because my daughter died in 2011. And I realized that I was slowly programming myself without meaning to. I was programming my wiring, my neural wiring, to isolate, to expect the worst, to be more and more tense, because the more stressed out we are, the more the body tenses, because it's a physiological connection to our thoughts and emotions. And my point is that this morning I woke up and I thought, oh, wow, this almost feels like I'm revisiting that deep isolation, because we are not, all the, everything's closed pretty much except for the grocery stores and a few places that have restaurants which are only doing takeout. So nobody is congregating anywhere in any of the churches. So for anybody who's listening to this like 10 years down the line and they're wondering what it's like, it's really eerie. You walk down the street and there are no cars on the street. I mean, it's just empty. So I would like to propose that we explore together this unwanted event, lest it cause further separation. Because what really makes people feel uncomfortable is this belief that we have that we are separate. And instead of allowing this to make us more divisive, I would ask, how can we make this something that brings us together? So let's set an intention to move towards a global increase in awareness of how to cultivate health and well-being. And the difference is moving towards what is wanted, not away from what is not wanted. It's a huge, really important distinction. Social programming and advertising inundate us day and night, right? And it comes from our parents and our schools, our education. We're exhorted to fight this and stop that and find the problem and wrestle it to the ground and basically destroy it, right? That's the opposite of what we're doing here. This, I would like to interject, is a way to live into an embodied creative process. You're creating your life as you go. You are the main person in it, and you should be front and center. But for most of us, we do what is expected. We do things out of duty. We do things because our mother thought it was a good idea, or our family expects it, or we've just settled into a role that we are unable to get out of. And, everything is sort of piled up so that we feel on some level like we don't have a choice, which, Feldenkrais was very clear. When you don't feel that you have choice, it's like being trapped in a corner. You have no choice. You can't get out. It causes anxiety. It causes a lack of a sense of disempowerment. It causes an emotional sense of being trapped. And so this method is a way out, a way to get more choices, to get more freedom. So I'm just going to have to assume that everybody is a beginner, because I have no control whatsoever over who's showing up. But what we're talking about here is a part of the proprioceptive system, the nervous system, a part of the system that keeps us safe in space, that can sense heat. It's like interoception is the ability to sense ourselves not just in time but in space, and I think it helps develop greater compassion. It can soothe the fight-flight response, diminish stress hormones, and improve emotional intelligence as we learn to pause and to feel into what is happening instead of reacting as if we're just triggered. So what I really want to emphasize here is that there are these principles that, like, what is this about? What is this Feldenkrais about? So when we dive deep into sensory experience, which is what interoception is, it's refining the ability to sense ourselves. When we dive deep into this sensory experience of the Feldenkrais method, we augment, we expand, we amplify sensations in the body. And this is the class format of Feldenkrais, which is called awareness through movement, or ATM, which is not related to banking. But at the same time, I must admit, it does work like money in the bank, because it's a process that keeps on giving exponentially. It's like surprise interest that seems to have accrued when you least expect it. It has the capacity to improve your reflexes in situations which happen faster than the speed of thought, right? When you have a reflex, you don't think. It's part of the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic stands for automatic, basically. So the part of the nervous system that catches you when you fall will respond more quickly. So an example, I mean, I've met so many people who have stories about this, and at one point I think I was trying to collect them, but I think I've lost track of where I put all of that. But as a rider, you know, I ride horses. I've been riding horses and working with horses as a Feldenkrais practitioner and as a body worker since 1994. And as a rider, I've had a lot of unexpected falls off of horses. Not a lot, actually. That's not true. I've been really lucky. I have, knock on wood, never broken a bone. I've had fractures, but never broken a bone. And those were unrelated to horses. Well, anyway, let's not go there. But as a rider, I've had unexpected falls off horses. And before doing ATM, I used to fall on my head, literally. Good thing they had helmets. After the process became embodied within me, I still fell off my horse when she swerved suddenly, because there was this little skinny cross-country jump at Eventful Acres in California, Oregon House, for those of you in Oregon House. Hello. And she swerved, right? Because she was not having any of that. And I landed on my feet. And it was so fun, because the other horses were actually as surprised as the other riders. Everybody was kind of looking around like, double take. It was fun. So it's not about learning the sequence of the lesson. Awareness through movement is about learning to relate to awareness as a process. So every lesson, and there are literally thousands of lessons for all parts of the body, they improve function, they improve the way you feel, they improve your agility and your ability to move and to have good balance until the day you die. There is a woman in Australia, a practitioner, I understand, who she was a high dive competitor, and she was doing high diving well into her 80s because she was able to keep herself mobile. I could go off on that tangent for another hour, but I won't. So it's probably good that I've given myself a little bit of a boundary here. So we'll get started in just a moment. So it's not about learning the sequence of the lesson. It's about learning to relate to awareness as a process. And since we're live and I have no control over who shows up, and I pretty much put it out there as a free lesson that you can do from home, I do have to start at the very beginning and assume people have no experience with ATM. But that's okay, because I firmly believe that the principles of awareness through movement are good principles to live by. And they bear repetition because, in essence, we are learning a process to counter some of the most negative social programming that we have all been exposed to since birth. So repetition in a state of relaxed awareness, which is a relaxed awareness, meaning it's akin to the brainwave state that we reach between waking and sleeping. So it's the best way to counter filters in programming, to reprogram our brains and to counter the programming that's running us via the subconscious mind. So you may find some of the principles directly challenge you to clear your filters and your assumptions, and the very concepts that bind you to living on autopilot, which we know from watching children. Children are connected to they're connected to awe and wonder and joy, but grown-ups, not so much, right? So you can tap back into that spontaneous curiosity and wonder that is the birthright of innocence when you release all this programming that runs you below the level of conscious awareness. I mean, it's well documented that the subconscious runs probably 80% to 90% of all behavior. So the principles of awareness that we are working with that make excellent principles to live by are they're seven. I've sort of narrowed it down to 7. So move slowly. Number 1, you can't hurt yourself if you move slowly. Number 2, take brief rests whenever you want to, because you are in charge of your own experience. Number 3 is note that you are both subject and object. Your subjective experience is of primary importance, meaning your personal experience is more important than what is said. So you will be given frequent chances to rest, but if you feel at any time that you need to just be still for a moment, you're in charge of your experience. 3, this is big. This is huge. Focus on what works, on what is easy, to counter the habit of focusing on problems, which is pretty obvious right now that our social programming is to focus on problems, right? So if you come to this class or do any of the ATMs with anyone, anywhere in the country, they will all teach you over time a new habit, a habit of focusing on what works. And this is a huge piece because what you focus on expands in awareness. And this is my favorite one. Number 4, find the most hedonistically pleasurable way through any situation. I love this one. And my mother, God rest her soul in heaven, she loved it too. She's definitely somebody who knew how to enjoy herself. So that is one of the things I aspire to continue to learn how to do, in spite of everything that life throws at us. So 5, in that same spirit, be playful, be open, be teachable, be interested in your own creative ways around pain. So our programming is to bogart through it. So rather than that, seek instead to find ways around it, through it, under it, over it. 6 is that is 6 actually. Rather than blowing through pain, less is more. So here, do not go to your limit. Back off from your limit. So it's a training in learning to respect your limits, which is completely counter to social programming. 7, make your moves gradually larger. Take your time. Tune into sensation rather than volume. Do not supersize it. The more subtle your awareness, the more you can refine your life to create a life you love. And that is how the principles work within the lesson. And those are principles you can take off the mat and use in your life to discover a richer, more subtle, more rewarding life. All right. So with that, I'm going to start with my 4 favorite words in the English language. Lie on your back. And I'll give it a few moments for you to get, maybe you've already gotten organized. If you don't happen to have movement mats like this, a lot of people use the mats that you get for, actually, when you go to the U-Haul moving store, they sell these mats that you can pack boxes in. They're not mats, actually, they're blankets. So a lot of people fold those in half and use those. They're probably more comfortable on a carpeted surface than on a floor like this. You can use yoga mats, but they're not really made for that. It's just basically the floor will get more comfortable the more your muscles release and the more you get into a state change where you're really getting closer to relaxed, closer to an expansion of awareness. So we always start with a body scan. So if you would lie with your arms and legs long. For those of you who do yoga, that would be a corpse pose. And we're just going to do an initial assessment that you can, it's an initial body scan. You can look back at the end and we'll do another scan and see what's changed. So if you would bring your attention to your pressure, the pressure of your body weight on the floor, and just notice if your heels are contacting the floor with the same amount of pressure on each side. Notice if perhaps a different uh, aspect of your heel, maybe one heel is more to the outside than the other. And trace your awareness up your leg into the hip and notice, well, so how would that relate to the hip? If, like, how would the bone be in the socket if one leg is more externally rotated than the other? And then bring your awareness to your pelvis. Just, it's not necessarily, there's no judgment here. It's not about good or bad. You're just sort of sensing to get a baseline. Can you sense the distance between your back and the floor? Maybe there is some distance, maybe there isn't. It's going to be different for everyone. Sense your spine. Like, at what point do you feel your spine touching the floor or the mat underneath you? Do you actually sense your shoulder blades as distinct from each other, or not really? Notice if your arms are lying so that your elbows are on the floor, or if maybe just the underside of your forearms are on the floor. How have you chosen to rest your hands on the floor? And notice again that that is a reflection of what's going on in your shoulders, in how long or how short the muscles of the supraspinatus are, and which are the muscles between the shoulder and the neck. If you could imagine a line from the top of your head to the base of your tailbone, notice the length of it. Notice if it's curved or straight. And other things to perhaps sense into is bring your attention to your breathing. And as you inhale, notice that you can exhale and wait. And you can trust your nervous system. It will, at some point, if you just wait, your nervous system will start breathing for you. So we reach in and we grab in where we have no business trying to control things. Like, we don't need to be in control of our breathing. Our body knows what to do. And now when you're ready, if you would, find the laziest way to slide your feet towards your sit bones so that you're bending your knees and standing your feet so that your knees are bent up towards the ceiling. And all of these directives are going to be in relation to you rather than your environment. So from your perspective, lying on your back, could you please bend your knees, stand your feet, and put your feet in the most comfortable place that you can so that you don't feel like you have to, they're not going to fall sideways, they're not going to fall inwards. And if you would, I want to touch base with the piece that we did last week, but it's awkward because the people who were here last week are not here this week. But we moved into this place where you're just pushing through your feet slightly, and notice if you can rock your pelvis a little bit, meaning rock your pelvis so that your back comes closer to the ground or your tailbone comes closer to the ground, alternately, very slowly. And see if you can just do that a few times. So you're pushing through the floor as if to rock your pelvis so that your lumbar spine comes closer to the floor. And notice if you do that, can you allow yourself to feel a connection through your spine, like a piston going up to the top of your head, such that you start to notice your chin coming closer to your breastbone so that you're feeling the movement from your feet through your skeleton and through your pelvis into the top of your head. Now, you may not be aware of the top of your head, but you may feel the difference in the change in pressure behind your skull, or the difference in the distance between your chin and your manubrium. And see if you can actually sort of speed that up and just do it like a jiggling motion for a moment, because sometimes that actually makes it, exaggerates it, makes it clear, and then stop and go back to doing it slowly. And if all you can sense is there's, a little bit of motion, you can't maybe feel the connection yet, don't worry about it. It's not about accomplishing a goal, just let it go. And put your legs down and just rest and be still for a moment. And while you're resting, I just want to address this idea that most people, when you give them an instruction to bend their knees and stand their feet, will lift their legs up in space and challenge gravity. But why do that? Why fight with gravity? Why not take the path of least resistance? That's what I'm talking about. That's what the idea of flow Feldenkrais is to learn to use awareness through movement as a means to train yourself to find the path of least resistance in any situation. This Feldenkrais was a genius because he found a concrete way to teach people a process that is not a metaphor. It's actually a means to training the way you use your awareness and cognition to find the path of least resistance in any aspect of your life. So the path of least resistance equates in this case to the laziest, most comfortable way to bend your knees and stand your feet, which means sliding your feet towards your buttocks until your knees bend and your feet are standing. And now, if you would, raise your arms towards the ceiling so your elbows are straight, your wrists are straight, but keep the joints soft, straight but soft. And put your hands together in a prayer position, if you will. So your hands are together, your arms are straight. And see if you can just gently lift your hands together towards the ceiling so that your shoulder blades, your scapulae, come off the floor, and then could you set them down? Now, many people don't have that range, so they don't really know where their shoulder blades are, but just experiment with this idea of reaching forth towards the ceiling above you with the intention of allowing your shoulder blades. What they do is they slide, or they should, if they're free, when the muscles are softened, they'll slide. When the muscles are at their optimal resting length, they'll slide around the ribs and come up away from the floor. And then when you keeping your wrists and your elbows straight but soft, when you bring them back to the ground, you may actually be able to sort of almost tap a little bit so that you can really start to feel, oh, there are my shoulder blades. Now I know where they are. And then let your arms rest on the ground. Just let your legs rest on the ground. So we don't burn a lot of calories doing Feldenkrais, but all this resting and starting over, you'd be surprised. The more you become connected to your body, the less you'll tend to be prone to excess, because you start to notice sooner what's going on with you. When you're ready, find a lazy way to bend your knees and stand your feet, and bring your arms into this same position where you're reaching for the ceiling with your hands together, joints soft. See if you can breathe freely while you do this awkward, unusual thing, right? Okay, so now do this with your eyes open, and notice that you may have had a temptation or a tendency to want to either do this with your eyes closed or open. So try to let go of your habit for a moment, because we're directly challenging habit and we're making it more obvious by doing things that you're probably not used to doing. But do this with your eyes open and with your arms straight but not locked. Bring your, what should we call this? Your steepled arms. They're like the steeples of a church, a steeple of a church, right? So bring this steeple towards what's over your head and back upright. So let's call upright in front of you towards the ceiling as your starting position, and then bring your hands and your arms towards what is behind the top of your head and back to the starting position. Do that several times. And notice allow yourself to move in response to this. So let it move through you. Notice if there's any movement you can make in your pelvis or in your legs and your feet, any pressure under your feet that could make this easier. Notice if your head wants to respond. And notice what you're doing with your eyes. Do your eyes follow the movement of your hands, or do they go the other way? So you're starting to train yourself to become aware of what's functional, what feels congruent, what feels like it's intelligent timing. Your body will recognize that as a sensation of congruence. And then pause for a moment in this position. And now take your arms straight, but towards your feet a little bit. And only go as far as you can go easily. Back off from what's the extreme for you. So make sure you never go to the extreme. So you're taking your steepled arms in the direction of the wall below your feet, and then back to this neutral place, allowing the movement to reverberate through you and allowing your eyes to follow your hands, allowing yourself to always have this awareness in the foreground of what you intend, and in the background, an awareness of an intention to release any muscular effort that is unrelated to what you're trying to do. And do this at your own pace. And then let it go and rest on your back. So remember the principle that I referred to, where it's all about, you are in charge of your own experience. So only do as much as you can do easily. And when your arms get tired, just give it up, let it go. All right, when you're ready, if you would, bend your knees and stand your feet, and put your hands in this steepled position again. And revisit what we just did. So without me giving you the instructions, see if you can remember what we just did and revisit that movement. So very much contrary to what most movement instruction is about. This is not about isolation, it's isolating muscle groups. It's not about It's not about making some part of yourself rigid so that you can strengthen another part. It's the yin aspect of exercise, which is agility, which is coordination. So it's about letting it reverberate through you. Like, what are the repercussions of the movement that you're doing in the rest of your body, and how can you let it flow through you? Again, we're back to this theme of the path of least resistance. Okay, so you've checked back in with that, and so you were moving forward and back, right? Okay. So now I want you to try something different. We're going to scramble the pattern. This is an intentional strategy that Feldenkrais used a lot to get you to be too it actually effectively makes it impossible to do your habit. So that's kind of a good thing in certain situations, right? So go back to the movement. So you're taking your hands towards the ceiling above you and then to the neutral position. So stick with that piece. But this time with your eyes open, instead of having your eyes follow the movement, could you take your eyes in the opposite direction and then allow your hands and your eyes to coordinate themselves so that they're moving in the opposite direction, so that the eyes go up towards what is overhead as your hands go towards the floor that is in front of you, or the floor, not the floor, the wall that is in front of you, and vice versa. And so that you begin to attune yourself to what your own rhythms are. There's a guy named Stanley Kellerman. He wrote another book with a title that I absolutely love. It's called Your Body Speaks Its Mind. But, it needed to have this subheading, but we never listen. And so this is your chance every week to cultivate a practice of listening to your body, because it has an innate intelligence that if we tune into it, it makes life richer. And it makes us safer, because when you're relaxed and aware and you've learned to expand your awareness, and when you work through these lessons, you'll find your balance is broader, your peripheral vision expands, and there's this incredible ability to be open and attuned to a broader perspective, to tap into what I'm increasingly seeing called the unified field in the writings of people like Greg Braden and Joe Dispenza and Robert Fritz, who wrote The Path of Least Resistance. I'm really loving this new quantum physics as it relates to human consciousness. Let it go, let your arms rest, let your legs go long. And I'm hoping that both Feldenkrais and Dennis Leary are in the room when I say, they both, I think it was actually Feldenkrais who said it first, but they both said, may I be your last teacher. May I teach you how to learn from your own experience so that you become your greatest teacher. When you're ready, bend your knees, stand your feet, put your arms in this steeple position, and this time take them from the neutral place straight ahead so that you're bringing your hands in the direction of the wall in front of you. And start systematically taking your eyes with the movement, and after one or two takes, pause and reverse the coordination so that your open eyes are going towards the wall in front of you while your hands are going in the opposite direction. And do this many times at your own pace. And then quit whenever you're ready, take a little break. And I'll just say something to address the fact that Feldenkrais is intentionally not demonstrated because it's like a treasure hunt in which you get to understand the innate intelligence of your body by learning to just feel it out, flink it out, feel and think it through. It's, I don't know why, but for some reason today I'm intensely aware of the lineage of teachers who went before me who I've learned from. There's so many of them. Any training includes many, many amazing trainers. And it's a little bit sobering because, you know, when I started, all the trainers I knew were alive, but now not so much. So I like the idea of channeling the presence of those who have gone before, because we do stand on their shoulders. And I've been lately investigating information that's very much related to Bert Hellinger's constellation therapy out of Germany, in which he worked with, you know, the generation after the Nazis who had all this stuff left over, survival guilt for one thing. And, you know, his idea is that some of our neuroses and anxieties and programming actually goes back 7 generations. And his work is extremely interesting. When you're ready, if you would bend your knees and stand your feet, put your arms in this steeple position. Notice if you're, you know, gritting your teeth or, you know, squinting or doing any funny thing with your mouth, and just release any excessive energy that is, or tension that's not related to what you're intending to do. And when you're ready, just make the full motion of, try this with your eyes closed now. Okay, so you're going to go just all the way in the direction of the wall above your head, all the way in the direction of the wall towards your feet. And notice as you do, like what it feels like when you take your eyes with the movement, and then pause. After a couple of takes, take your eyes in the opposite direction. They can be closed, but take your eyes in the opposite direction. And notice as you do this, can you slow it down? Can you expand your awareness so that in the background you're noticing, are you feeling any change in the pressure under your feet? That would be otherwise known as ground forces. So we're talking physics here. We're talking leverage. So notice that as you take your hands in this steepled position through the middle, like the middle, the neutral position is, it would be the apex of a fulcrum if you had like a teeter-totter on top of your fingers, right? So notice that you could actually pause for a moment with your hands sort of steepled straight up, feeling your shoulder blades and resting on the floor. And you could let some of the weight of your arms, the entire length of your arms and hands, rest on the ground for a moment in that neutral position. And then go back to going forward and back. But notice at what point do you reach the apex of the fulcrum, and at what point do you crest and then go forward or behind it, such that you can use gravity to create momentum, to create movement that is hardly any work at all. And notice that perhaps it's more work when you're coming back away from gravity towards the apex, so that you become more sensitive to what actually feels like more work. And when we're blowing through the life, not paying attention, we don't really have the sensitivity to differentiate what's more work. So everything is work because we just apply the same amount of excessive effort to everything. So let that go for a moment. Maybe rest with your legs up if you like. Just let your arms rest. And as you're being still, notice if anything is working too hard, and intend in the next segment to spread the effort throughout more of yourself. How could you bring more of yourself to the table and have less isolation going on? I love that. It's so in keeping with our theme. Less isolation. When you're ready, steeple your hands again. And now this time, I want you to think of, above your head is north and forward is south. So you're sitting in the middle of a compass, if you will. And take your arms, instead of taking them down between whatever's below you or in front of you, take them diagonally to the left slightly and back to the neutral place. And notice how that reverberates through you. Notice how it shifts the pressure underneath your feet. It shifts the diagonal, the angle of the pressure under your pelvis. Notice how your eyes want to go with you wherever you go. This is very significant because the way that the eyes are organized is very much in control of and related to the amount of tension in the neck. So a really interesting way to release tension in the neck is to work with the eyes in this way. And then pause at some point and change the coordination. So you're still going sort of on a diagonal towards the lower left quadrant and up towards the upper right quadrant, taking your eyes open with your hands, and then pause, change the coordination, take your eyes opposite. And then rest. Whenever you're ready, let your legs go long, let your arms go long, and be still. So there's this interesting thing that goes on with the mouth. If you think about a child who is learning to write their name, you'll find often that they will do something kind of, there's an oral aspect to learning. So you might find that when they're really focused and concentrating and unself-conscious in that beautiful, spontaneous way of children, they may stick the tip of their tongue between their lips. And it's not necessarily attention. It's like an eagerness. It's an intentness. But as you're resting, could you scan your body and notice if somehow by default you've fallen into a habit of holding your teeth or your tight, or your mouth, so that you're just, could you bring your attention to your lips and your cheeks and your neck, and just intentionally, deliberately release any holding, any bracing, all of that habitual bracing that we do. It happens below the level of conscious awareness in response to frustration, in response to impatience, in response to, a sense of dis-ease at the proliferation of fear that's going around. So I challenge you to find ways to detach, to disengage, to look for what works, to look for what feels good, to look for what could be a benefit. Because there's two sides to everything. Life is about polarity. Living is a dual experience, right? There's good, there's bad, there's right, there's wrong, there's up, there's down. You can't have one without the other. So look for the flip side. When you're ready, bend your knees and stand your feet and assume this same position with your arms steepled. And this time, instead of going towards that lower left quadrant to the outside of your legs, go the opposite direction towards that with your arms, straight, with joints soft, towards the outer right side of your legs. Only go as far as you can go easily. So you're going through that neutral place and then back to the top left quadrant. Notice that you know, what is your impulse without any direction? Do you do this with your eyes open? Do you do it with your eyes closed? And just continue. So one of the principles we work with is continue the same action several times so that it becomes a really clear image, felt sensory pathway, visual, whatever your kinesthetic sense is that is the most prevalent, because we're all different. And then do the opposite, so that if you chose to do it with your eyes open, try doing it with your eyes closed. Foreground is the movement, background is your breathing, background is, are you free? Are you able to move without scrunching your forehead or doing anything that, you know, isn't really related to what your intention is? And then pause and reverse so that you're doing the coordination between the eyes and the hands in the opposite way. So the hands are going one way, the eyes are going the other. And just notice how long it takes to synchronize this. And notice that when you really begin to focus on movement alone and sensing along with coordinating, that it becomes something that can fill your attention. And which is why, you know, I've taught meditation since 2007, did some advanced trainings there with Richard Miller, and you know, his work with the you know, how do we calm the nervous system in people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I used to joke that, you know, there are 108 ways to meditate. Last time I did a search on the internet, which was years ago, there are probably more now. But I joke that awareness through movement is like meditation with training wheels for those who just cannot sit still and quiet their mind, because sometimes it brings up the things that we've avoided, and so, you know, it can actually become quite emotionally distressing to try and just be mindful and quiet the mind. Whereas when you be mindful of movement, you can fill your mind with sensation that then calms the, you know, the polyvagal system, which the part of that autonomic nervous system that responds and gets stuck in a heightened pattern of arousal. You can calm that with these soothing, quiet pace that you're doing at the same time while you're learning to use your attention to find a way to reacquaint yourself with what feels good in your body. So let that go, let your arms and legs rest, and let's think about that for a moment. Speaking from experience, I can attest to the fact that for those who've experienced any kind of trauma, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, there is a tendency to want to get out of the body. And in extreme cases, it's actually healthy to disassociate. But what's interesting is that if you think about certain forms of meditation, you're instructed to be inside the body paying attention, and then you're also in you know, the tantric tradition of meditation, you're instructed to step outside of the body and see yourself meditating. So you can And the idea with that practice is that you begin to cultivate the observer. You begin to cultivate the capacity to observe yourself in a non-judgmental, detached way, which, as it happens, is also the ideal of scientific observation. Now, whether that's actually possible or not is up for debate, right? Because there's this idea that as soon as we observe something, we change what we're observing because there is an interaction between the observer and the observed. But that's a sort of slightly different conversation. But just notice that as you're resting, you are cultivating this ability to observe your experience without any real goal, with no need to justify, no need to judge, no need to evaluate. And that's so freeing because it's so unusual. And as you're resting, we've done this diagonal movement only on one side. Notice that as you lie in this beginning position, is there any residue of the movement that you've done that was sort of so asymmetrical, so diagonal? Is there any sense of maybe lying there slightly like a Picasso painting? That's your nervous system has sort of left markers that are traces, which if you did this movement for 8 hours a day, right, that would become a new neural pathway. And I wouldn't suggest that, but in this situation, when you work so slowly with awareness and attention and movement, you start to realize that you can make changes in how you feel much more quickly. Like, you'd have to do that. If you did it without awareness, you'd have to do it for a very long time before you'd actually notice the difference. And you'd have hurt yourself before you did notice the difference. When you're ready, would you bend your knees and stand your feet, please? Put your arms in the same position, and this time take them in the opposite diagonal. Allow your, be systematic. So we've pretty much begun with the eyes open, pretty much begun with the eyes going with the movement of the hands. Do this several times at your own pace, going from the upper left quadrant to the lower right quadrant. And then change it so that you're doing it with the eyes closed. And then change it so that you're taking the eyes in the opposite direction with the eyes closed. And then change it so that you're taking the eyes in the opposite direction with the eyes open. So you scramble the whole thing. Just bear with me. Just go with it. Just go with the flow and just make those changes. And notice the way that it shifts the pressure underneath your feet. Shifts the pressure in your pelvis. And then stop and bring your arms straight up and reach one more time towards the ceiling with your arms straight but not, joints are straight but not locked. See if you can reach your shoulder blades forth so that your hands, your fingers come just a little bit closer to the ceiling. And then bring your shoulder blades back onto the ground and maybe try to sort of tamp them on the ground a few times so that you're just like bump, 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 so that you can feel those are the edges of my scapulae. And then let it go and rest with your arms and legs long. So I did massage therapy for many years. I started in 1994, worked with thousands of people every year and hundreds of horses. And in horses, there's a muscle behind the shoulder that looks like, Pegasus wings. And in humans, you know, we would really be very interested in freeing up the shoulder blades, so that the trapezius muscle in between the shoulder blades, right? We would that connect the shoulders to the spine. It's, you know, that area of the spine is the most. It's like the biggest blind spot in most people, so they're not really conscious of that area. But you know, we would sort of joke or call that, you know, let me free up your wings, right? So as the shoulder blades become free to move around, it's like you're getting your wings back. And if you're a horse person, chances are you know, you may be obsessed with movement, and if you're a dressage person, you're probably obsessed with movement. And you know, as you play with this, it's so fun. You can just, you know, you might find yourself sitting in a coffee shop outside watching people walk by, and you'll notice people walking with their arms don't swing. It's because their shoulders are pretty much plastered to their back. As the you know, the less we move, the less we breathe, the less we drink, the less fluid there is, the less mobile we are. The fascia, which is the sheath, it's like this translucent, beautiful, shimmering sheath that surrounds not just every muscle, but every single fiber of every muscle. And the fibers run lengthwise, you know, kind of like the grain in wood. And each one of those fibers is sheathed in this beautiful translucent fascia. And when we don't breathe enough, we don't drink enough, and we don't move enough, all that stuff, it gets stuck together. It gets sticky. And so as you play with movement in this very slow way, and gradually increasing your range of motion, you're gradually bringing back the circulation and the cellular intelligence. Like there's an awareness at the cellular level. I'm not going there today. That's a whole nother conversation. So when you're ready, if you would, just one last time, bend your knees and stand your feet in the laziest possible way. Bring your arms into this steeple position. And then think of yourself as being on a compass. You know, it's as if the heart of the compass is right at the apex underneath your hands, which I guess is your heart. Yes. And think about bringing your hands towards your true north, so that you're moving in a direction that's completely and totally authentic to you, to your true north, with yourself as the reference point, not some external thing. And then the south. So take it through the range and just play with it. Do whichever aspect of it you found the most comfortable, the most congruent, the one that felt the best is really your main criterion. What a wonderful way to live, right? And play with that a few times, and then explore the different points in the compass, and just notice if there is a more range there with less effort, more clarity there without any, not having had any need for force. And when you've investigated this, notice, you know, what you do with your eyes. Notice the relationship between your eyes and your neck. And then do what you feel your body is inviting you to do. And then stop and let your arms and legs go long for a moment. And let's finish up by bending the knees, stand the feet, and just pushing through your feet so that you're feeling perhaps the lower part of your heels, you know, like your whole foot is on the ground when your feet are standing, but maybe the balls of your feet come a little bit, but they lighten slightly in pressure as the heels are dug into the floor a little bit, and you're pushing through your knees so that you're rocking your pelvis. And just see if you can feel that moving like a piston up through the spine so that your head responds. Everything is connected. Is it more clear now than it was when you began? And could you let that go and let your arms and legs go long and just do a final scan where you're first noting your breathing. Notice if, as you take a few deeper breaths, are your ribs more free to inhale more fully? Is your belly more free? And scan systematically from, you're growing this habit of noticing how your heels contact the floor. If there's more symmetry there or less, it's going to be different for everyone. Your body is a trail guide to your history, all the things you've experienced and the habits and the things that you do in a given day. We can talk about that more next time. I'd like to really get people to understand the idea of, what is the normal resting length of the muscular system, and how does the nervous system manage that? What is homeostasis? Those of you with nursing backgrounds already know. Scan your body to sense the way that your calves are contacting the floor. Notice the pressure underneath your pelvis. Notice the lumbar spine. Like, how far is your low back from the floor? Has it gotten closer, or has anything changed? And notice the front of yourself as well, which may have been less tangible before. So as you scan the front of your hip flexors, we've released some of the tightness that is a response to sitting for a long time, which, most of us either sit in the car too long or sit at a desk too long. So do you notice a sense of greater opening in the hip flexors in front of the pelvis? Maybe there's more expansiveness when you inhale sideways, so that your ribs are the expanding sideways. Notice also, how have you chosen to rest your hands and your elbows against the ground? And is there a different relationship now in the way that your arms connect with your shoulders? Because you've done a lot of stuff there with the shoulders. The shoulders are a joint that have a huge range, most of which we don't really access. And notice as you lie there, is there any change in the quality of your mind, your thought, compared to when you began? And notice how nice it is to have a mind that is calmer, that has more spaciousness. When you feel more spacious in your body and in your mind, you're going to find yourself moving through your day more slowly and with greater presence of mind, which is just a much more pleasant way to live. So let's take this off the mat. So before you go into your normal sort of everyday habits, could you slowly roll to one side and come to standing with the intention of being conscious of how you do that? Because that will make you do it slowly enough that you really bring this level of awareness from lying down into standing. And stand for a moment and see again if can you feel the weight of your body over your feet. Does it feel, if you were to sway a little bit forward and back, do you feel more clearly how when you sway forward, there's more pressure under the balls of your feet? When you sway backwards, there's more pressure on your heels. So that you take this into a little bit of a walking around the room and notice what you sense. What comes to your attention without any specific direction? Do you feel more grounded? Like that's the 9 out of 10 most common comment I've gotten from people when they stand up after a lesson. Even from people that normally wouldn't use that word. And what does that actually mean? It just feels like you have, like when I feel more grounded, put this in the I feel like my relationship with gravity is more clear, more concrete. I feel safer. I feel more stable, and yet contradictory, or ironically, able to move more freely in any direction at any time, which is a safer way to be. So next time, I also would like to talk about, so how the resting length of the muscles, what is that about? How the nervous system regulates that, and what is muscle memory? And next time, bring your questions. We'll talk about things in advance because you may feel this right now that, after a lesson, it's hard to put things into words. And so it's really hard to have a conversation. So we usually do question and answers before the lesson. So if you have questions, we'll start out with some questions at the beginning next week. We're going to just do this. I've just set this same Zoom link on. It's going to be the link for the next however long it takes. So no attachment, no judgment. We're just going to be present and hold a space for everybody to slow down, to get connected, to go deeper into themselves, and to really find new ways to be healthier and investigate what does it mean to be healthy and to be well and to cultivate a sense of well-being. So we'll be doing this next week. I'm going to post this so people can experience it. Maybe, I do know there were a couple of people who were going to be tuning in and, or they can't tune in this week, but they're going to tune in next. But I'll post this online as a recording so you can do this at your leisure. And thank you for your attention. Namaste. See you next week, same time, same place.